I put Fatty's slippers inside. As Lin Seven-Night began casting the spell, the magic circle also burst into intense light. The slippers were slowly lifted and eventually vanished completely. Seeing the sacrifice succeed, the glow of the magic circle gradually faded away, and Lin Seven-Night discovered a problem. Isn't this supposed to be a random summoning? Where is the thing I summoned? Suddenly a buzzing sound reached his ears. It was a mosquito flying past. Lin Seven-Night didn't think much of it at first, but soon realized something was wrong. It's May. Where could a mosquito possibly come from? I sacrificed a pair of slippers and ended up summoning a mosquito, is that it? That mosquito wobbled unsteadily and landed right on Fatty's thigh. Fatty scratched it, rolled over and went right back to sleep. Lin Seven-Night was speechless for a moment. Fatty's slippers summoning mosquitoes to bite Fatty. Isn't that a case of using the original soup to digest the original food? However, Lin Seven-Night is now even more eager to give it a try. This magic is quite intriguing. A night passed and Fatty let out a scream as soon as he woke up. He had at least 80, if not 100 mosquito bites all over his body. Fatty was going crazy. Where did these mosquitoes come from in May? He scratched and asked, Seven-Night, there are mosquitoes in our room and I bet there's more than one. Have you been bitten too? Lin Seven-Night turned her head while brushing her teeth and said, No, I haven't. Fatty got out of bed with a puzzled look and asked, Where are my slippers? Did I kick them under the bed? But when Fatty lay down on the ground to look under the bed, he was startled again and exclaimed, Holy crap! He stared under the bed in shock. What the hell is going on here? Under his bed lay a bizarre assortment of items. Small dolls, a wooden fish, light bulbs, leftover food, and even a pair of worn stockings. Fatty picked up the stockings with a puzzled look and asked uncertainly, Seven-Night, these aren't? Lin Seven-Night replied, I don't know. Anyway, they're not mine. How could I possibly have stockings to match? Suddenly, Lin Seven-Night gave a sly smile and said, But then again, they might belong to Chow Abyss. Hearing this, Fatty felt his worldview had been shaken. Chow Abyss, you with those thick eyebrows and big eyes, how could you have such a hobby? Breakfast time. Chow Abyss felt quite uncomfortable while eating breakfast. He looked at Fatty, who was staring at him with a strange expression. What's with that look? Fatty said with a deeply earnest tone, Chow Abyss, I really didn't expect this. On the surface you seem so honest and straightforward, yet you actually have such a peculiar preference. Chow Abyss was completely bewildered. What preference? What are you talking about? Fatty glared. You have your own preferences, that's fine. But why are you hiding your stuff at my place? Just as Chow Abyss was getting more and more confused, Fatty put on a look of utter dismay. I'm the only son of an ordinary family in Bailey. If this gets out and people misunderstand, how am I supposed to face all those lovely sisters who have a crush on me? Chow Abyss is completely confused about what's going on now. Fatty, what on earth are you talking about? How did you end up getting so carried away with yourself? Lin Seven-Night saw that continuing the conversation might accidentally reveal something, so he quickly interrupted. It's not important, none of it is important. Let's just hurry up and eat. Chow Abyss suddenly remembered something. By the way, aren't we about to graduate in 2 or 3 months? I heard that every year before graduation, the instructors release a score ranking list that ranks all the new recruits. Lin Seven-Night frowned slightly. What's the use of this ranking? Does it disqualify some recruits with too low rankings from joining the Night Watchers? Chow Abyss shook his head. That's not the case. Under normal circumstances, the training camp does not eliminate recruits. I only know that this score ranking seems to be used to determine each person's assignment after graduation. The specifics are unclear to me. Upon hearing this, Fatty suddenly froze. Wait, does that mean after we graduate from here, all of us will have to go our separate ways? Chow Abyss's expression darkened as he nodded. Yes. Fatty slumped on the table dejectedly. Then can I apply to go to the same place as Seven-Night? Chow Abyss thought for a moment. Seven-Night, as a dual divine agent, is highly likely to be snatched away by a special team or transferred to the Shangjing squad. You, on the other hand, definitely won't get in. Give up on that idea, he said, patting Fatty on the back. Lin Seven-Night shook his head. Actually, I'm not particularly keen on going to Special Branch or Shangjing. If possible, I'd rather stay in Songnan. By the way, how exactly is this score ranking determined? Is it based on exams? Chow Abyss shrugged. I heard that this score ranking is quite complex and involves all of our training programs. However, the most important part is a hidden score that no one knows what it is. Just as the new recruits were chatting over breakfast, the instructors had already arrived at the back hill, and the faint sound of helicopter rotors could be heard in the distance. Yuan Gang gazed into the distant sky and laughed. Excellent. It seems the rookie's day of revelry is about to begin. As he spoke, several military transport helicopters had already reached the sky above the instructors. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 months passed by in an orderly manner. That morning, Lin Seven-Night woke up from his dream. As soon as he woke up, he noticed something was off. He got up and glanced at the alarm clock. It was already 5:30 in the morning. But where was the whistle? Lin Seven-Night picked up his toiletries and headed toward the restroom. As he walked, he pondered. Usually, the instructor blows the whistle to wake us up at 5. Why hasn't there been any sound today? Upon arriving at the restroom, Lin Seven-Night saw Chow Abyss washing up. Chow Abyss greeted Lin Seven-Night upon seeing him. Seven-Night, you're awake too? Lin Seven-Night nodded. What's going on today? Why wasn't the whistle blown? I feel like something's off. Chow Abyss paused for a moment, stopping his face washing to joke. Could it be that the instructor is feeling merciful today and wants to let us sleep in a bit longer? Just like that, in the blink of an eye, an hour had passed. Lin Seven-Night glanced at the clock showing 6:30 and was absolutely certain. Something had definitely gone wrong. Then he grabbed his beloved slippers, which he was reluctant to sacrifice, and headed over to Fatty's bedside. He swung them with full force and smacked Fatty right across his chubby face. The sharp crack was so loud it could have woken up the neighbors. But strangely enough, Fatty's face turned red from the slap. Yet he showed no sign of waking up at all. By 6, still not awake, he fell into deep slumber. Azure Bamboo blew bubbles, revealing divine authority. The canteen echoed with piercing screams. The mysterious spider had yet to retreat. Lin Seven-Night kicked off his shoe, yet Fatty didn't even flinch. Lin Seven-Night immediately sensed that something was amiss. Just then, the dormitory door was forcefully pushed open, and standing in the doorway was none other than Shun Azure Bamboo, who exclaimed, "Oh no! Li Liang and the others have been asleep the whole time. No matter how much we try, we can't wake them up." Wait a moment, what are you doing with that slipper? Lin Seven-Night very naturally avoided answering the question about the slipper. They too? It seems it's not natural sleep, but rather they've fallen into some kind of mental trap. Shun Azure Bamboo said with a serious expression. Not just them. In our dormitory building, 70% of the people have fallen into this state. Lin Seven-Night pondered for a moment and asked, what about the instructors then? Shun Azure Bamboo frowned even more deeply. I just went out to look, and the strangest part is right here. All the instructors and support staff have disappeared. Now the entire training camp is left with just us new recruits. Lin Seven-Night gave a slight nod. Were there any signs of a fight? Shun Azure Bamboo shook his head. No. Lin Seven-Night thought for a moment. I see. At that moment, Chow Abyss, who had just walked in, happened to overhear their conversation. Seven-Night, what have you thought of? Lin Seven-Night said. If I'm not mistaken, this should be a drill or an exam. The instructors and others collectively disappeared without any trace of combat. This can only mean they withdrew on their own initiative and did so with extreme stealth. Think about it, the instructors are all at least at the flowing stage, and Commander Yuan Gang is even at the sea stage. How could such a powerful lineup be wiped out without a single trace? Upon hearing this, Chow Abyss nodded with a hint of realization. Indeed. Finally, the three of them walked straight out along the corridor. As they walked, Lin Seven-Night remarked. Now that the instructors have collectively disappeared, it's just to create an environment, a situation where only us new recruits are left, isolated and helpless. I guess. They are observing our every move at this very moment. Hearing this, Shun Azure Bamboo couldn't hold back and made a friendly gesture toward the surveillance camera. Damn it, they're messing with us again. Screw their test. And naturally, this scene was also seen by the instructors behind the surveillance. Instructor Hong nodded. Hot-tempered and impulsive. After saying that, he deducted 1 point from Shun Azure Bamboo on the scoring board in his hand. Congratulations to Shun Azure Bamboo for earning the title of the first person to be penalized. Instructor Han then asked, Old Hong, is it really okay to just leave those 3 flowing stage mystics in the training camp? The highest stage among the new recruits is only Pawn stage. What if there are casualties? Instructor Hong smiled and replied, Don't worry. This is somewhat of a tradition in the training camp. Besides, all 3 mystics have been shackled, significantly weakening their strength. If it truly comes to a critical moment, we can remotely eliminate them. At this point, Instructor Hong suddenly grinned mischievously and added, "Besides, there are some atmosphere crew members hidden in the camp. They can step in during critical moments. Nothing will go wrong." Instructor Han was taken aback. Atmosphere crew? Where did they come from? Did you even hire cheerleaders? Why call them that name? Instructor Hong smiled mysteriously. "You'll find out when the time comes." Before long, Lin Seven-Night and the others had gathered the remaining conscious recruits on the rooftop. Lin Seven-Night glanced over the assembled crowd. He asked, "What time did each of you wake up?" The recruits began to recall the time they woke up. In summary, they all woke up before 6 o'clock. Lin Seven-Night nodded. "Indeed, not a single person here woke up after 6. Chow Abyss looked puzzled. "What does this have to do with the time we woke up?" Lin Seven-Night said with a serious expression, "If I'm not mistaken, 6 a.m. is likely a critical time point. Those who haven't woken up before 6 a.m. will have their consciousness pulled into some unknown place, remaining in a deep slumber." Shun Azure Bamboo looked somewhat surprised. "Could this also be the work of the instructors?" Lin Seven-Night shrugged. "Not sure, but this style of laziness leading to a bad outcome really seems like something the instructors would do." Chow Abyss quickly asked, "Then what should we do now?" Lin Seven-Night's mind raced rapidly. If all of this was a drill arranged by the instructors, then what was the standard for completion? Could it be to awaken the others? But if the mental trap was directly created by the instructors, then how are we supposed to break it? At this thought, Lin Seven-Night spoke up and asked, "Does anyone have a forbidden ruin related to mental attacks?" A new recruit said, "I know a girl named Zhang Tiny. Her forbidden ruin is related to mental abilities." At this point, he turned his head toward the direction of the female dormitory and said, "But the atmosphere over at the girls' dorm is really strange right now. Seems like none of them are awake. There's not a single sound." Lin Seven-Night nodded and said loudly, "We need the girl named Zhang Tiny. Leave a few people to guard this building. The rest, come with me to the warehouse to get weapons, then head to the girls' dormitory." With that, he led a group of people downstairs and rushed toward the weapons warehouse. Before long, the group arrived at the weapons warehouse. A new problem now emerged. The warehouse door was locked, and the key was in the instructor's hands. They had no way to get the weapons themselves. But none of this could stump Lin Seven-Night and the others. Shin Azure Bamboo popped a piece of bubble gum into his mouth and moments later, blew a bubble. The bubble drifted unsteadily until it floated right in front of the tightly shut warehouse door. Seeing the bubble reach its position, Azure Bamboo smiled proudly. He snapped his fingers crisply. The bubble instantly radiated brilliant light. It burst open with a deafening roar. The small iron gate couldn't withstand such an impact and was instantly blown to pieces. Just like that, Lin Seven-Night and his group used some unconventional methods to enter the weapons warehouse. Everyone headed straight for the stellar blade, except for taking out what they needed for themselves. They also brought out quite a bit extra, ready to distribute to those guarding the building. The teamwork was incredibly smooth. But just as they were about to head back toward the dormitory building, a sudden scream came from the cafeteria on the other side. Shun Azure Bamboo gritted his teeth. It came from the cafeteria. Should we go there first? Lin Seven-Night made a prompt decision. Head to where the scream came from first. Saving people is the priority. In a moment, they arrived at the cafeteria entrance. The iron chain that had locked the cafeteria was torn apart by something. Shun Azure Bamboo suddenly sniffed the air, his face darkening. "There's the smell of blood." Lin Seven-Night nodded solemnly upon hearing this. "Everyone be careful and follow behind me." As Lin Seven-Night pulled open the cafeteria door, the sight before them shocked the crowd into a flurry of unrest. The entire cafeteria now resembled a spider's lair, with scattered spider silk everywhere. Everyone followed closely behind Lin Seven-Night, gradually making their way inside. Lin Seven-Night picked up a strand of spider silk and whispered, "This isn't ordinary spider silk. It must be some kind of mystery related to spiders." Suddenly, a new soldier pointed in a direction and growled in a low voice. That's Wang Li who lives on the second floor. How could this happen?" Everyone followed the direction of his finger and looked. It was actually a familiar new recruit, his body mutilated beyond recognition, his chest and abdomen torn open, with all his internal organs missing. For a moment, the new recruits panicked. This is not a drill. There really is a powerful mystery here. Even Chao Yuan and Shun Songju showed a hint of panic on their faces. At this moment, Lin Qi suddenly shouted sternly, "Quiet!" As soon as these words were spoken, all the new recruits fell completely silent. Lin Qi's leadership ability was unmistakably evident at this moment. Lin Qi turned to look at the body on the ground and analyzed. From hearing the scream to us arriving here, it definitely took no more than 2 minutes. At this point, Lin Qi slowly drew his long blade, including the time for hunting and feeding. That mysterious creature is likely still hiding here. Seven-Night threw the knife handle, causing Yuan Sui, Spider Boy, to regret not having longer legs. Threads of fate entangle the soul. Fatty forbidden item reveals divine authority. After confirming that the mysterious spider in the cafeteria hasn't left, Lin Seven-Night then drew his long sword and stood ready for battle. Chow Abyss called out worriedly, "Seven-Night." Lin Seven-Night nodded slightly with her back to him. "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." After saying this, he led Chow Abyss and Shin Azure Bamboo inside, instructing as they walked, "The rest of you do not come in. The more people there are, the more likely it is to trigger the tripwires, making it even more dangerous." In fact, even without Lin Seven-Night's instructions, these newcomers probably wouldn't have dared to enter. As they reached the deeper parts, the surrounding spider silk became even more dense. Suddenly, Lin Seven-Night's gaze sharpened as he looked ahead. Just a short distance away from him, a massive white spider was coiled on the ceiling. Its crimson eyes fixed on Lin Seven-Night, emitting a hissing sound. Suddenly, a faint glow emanated from Lin Seven-Night's chest. Lin Seven-Night was taken aback. The Azure Guardian had been activated. That spider just launched a mental attack. He held his breath and focused his mind, flipping the long blade in his hand. Then he abruptly hurled it toward the direction of the spider. The long blade struck the ceiling directly, cracking a large piece of it. But it landed quite far from the spider, leaving the spider utterly confused. What was the meaning of this move? Pointing east but striking west? Or pointing at the mulberry tree but cursing the locust tree? In contrast, among the three, Lin Seven-Night, Chow Abyss, though somewhat surprised, had already mentally prepared himself. Shun Azure Bamboo, however, almost burst out laughing and whispered, "In all my life I've never seen anyone with such terrible aim." Lin Seven-Night was on the verge of tears. "My abyssal deity ruins can now extend up to 20 meters. Within those 20 meters I can hit whatever I aim at. But beyond 20 meters it's really just up to fate." Shun Azure Bamboo, still chuckling, snapped his fingers and said, "Let me handle this." As he spoke, he snapped his fingers toward the spider and instantly, an intense explosion erupted right where the spider was located, sending a large section of the ceiling crashing down. As the dust gradually settled and fell away, suddenly the spider burst out from the dwindling dust, charging at the three of them at high speed. The three immediately braced themselves, ready to launch a counterattack. But what was absurd was that the spider actually made a turn in midair and dashed toward the back door, clearly trying to make a run for it. The three of them were completely dumbfounded. What was up with this spider? Was it some kind of flanking tactic or something? The instructors in the monitoring room naturally witnessed this scene as well. Yuan Gang couldn't help but frown. Why is this spider boy so timid? How can merely running away put any pressure on these new recruits? Instructor Han walked over to Yuan Gang and said with a laugh, "Is this what old Hong called the atmosphere squad? Wang Li's corpse prop is so realistic. It totally fooled all the new recruits." Yuan Gang looked at Lin Seven-Night, who was still pondering in the surveillance footage, and said with a smile, "Well, there's still someone who hasn't been fooled. After all, he's a dual agent chosen by 2 deities. How could he not have some skills up his sleeve? But don't worry, the best is yet to come. I won't make it easy for them." Spider Boy ran away. Lin Seven-Night and the other two simply stopped to ponder on the spot. Given the huge gap in strength between the two sides, why would the spider still flee? This isn't right. It's 12 parts wrong out of 10. Shin Azure Bamboo couldn't figure it out and asked directly, "So what do we do next?" Lin Seven-Night thought for a moment. "That spider is fast and powerful. We won't chase it. Let's stick to the original plan and head to the 3 girls' dormitories first. But we need to prevent it from attacking our base, so we should leave more people behind to protect those still sleeping in the dormitories." Shin Azure Bamboo thought for a moment and volunteered, "I'll go back and stand guard." Lin Seven-Night nodded. "All right, you're strong enough. If the spider comes, you should be able to hold it off until we come to the rescue." While the three were discussing, they had no idea that the spider was running away at top speed. All 8 legs were moving so fast they became a blur. At this moment, Spider Boy was absolutely terrified. Although Lin Longye's thrown knife didn't hit him, the way it was done was absolutely terrifying. And that man who could make things explode with a snap of his fingers, the way he stared at me felt like he wanted to tear me to pieces. As Spider-Boy ran, his body gradually transformed, turning into a little boy. He muttered to himself with a hint of grievance, "I just wanted to find a place to sleep. Why did they have to hit me?" In the end, he burst into loud sobs, crying, "It's too dangerous here. I want to get out." Crying and crying. Spider-Boy suddenly shuddered as he remembered what Yuan Gang had said to him. "If you dare sneak away, I wouldn't mind adding a serving of braised spider legs to the cafeteria menu." Instantly, Spider-Boy's sobbing stopped. No, absolutely cannot run away. That man really could stew him alive. For a moment, he stomped his feet in frustration. They're all bad people. What should I do now? Once Spider-Boy calmed down, he began to recall the task that Yuan Gang had assigned him, to first gain control over the minds of those who were asleep. Remembering the mission, Spider-Boy scanned the area and then dashed toward an abandoned warehouse. When he reached the front of the warehouse, he craned his neck and looked around cautiously. After confirming no one was inside, he walked in with confidence. The first step was to weave the web. As his hands danced, countless silk threads gushed forth. In an instant, the entire abandoned warehouse was filled with webs centered around him. Then he stretched both hands toward the sky. Strands of silk with strange fluctuations sprayed out, transformed into invisible threads flying out from the abandoned warehouse. In an instant, they connected to the foreheads of the still sleeping new recruits. In no time, cocoon-like spider silk structures began to appear one after another on the warehouse ceiling. Though seemingly empty, they appeared to envelop something. Spider-Boy muttered to himself, "I'm sorry. The instructors ordered me to weave the web at 6 o'clock, trapping those of you who haven't gotten up yet as spirit forms. Blame the demons then. It's their fault." Suddenly, Spider-Boy froze and looked in a certain direction. He said with some surprise, "The others woke up long ago, they just couldn't return to their bodies. But this guy actually slept all the way until now." Inside that mass of spider silk was clearly the sleeping soul of Bily Fatty, sound asleep. Spider-Boy sighed as he looked at him. "Sleeping so soundly, I really envy you." I don't know how much time had passed, but Fatty woke up from his dream and stretched lazily with a big yawn. He rubbed his eyes and said, "How did I sleep so comfortably today? Didn't the instructor blow the whistle?" But as Fatty took a clear look at his surroundings, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. "What the hell is this? Hey, what the hell? Where the hell have you brought me? Is this still the training camp?" As soon as he lowered his head, he noticed something unusual. This was a rare spiritual class forbidden ruins capable of stripping souls. "Never mind, let's get out of here first." Thinking about Fatty, he reached out his hand and unexpectedly, a ring on his spiritual body began to radiate a golden light. Then with a sudden pull, the ring transformed into a long blade that resembled a spirit, appearing in his hand. It was none other than the forbidden item soul-cutting blade. At the same time, Spider-Boy, who had already started slacking off and dozing, was abruptly jolted awake by a sharp pain in his head. When he looked again, he realized that Fatty had disappeared without a trace. When he arrived at the spot where Fatty had been, he picked up the spider silk and discovered that it had been severed by a blade. This guy actually managed to damage his soul weaver. At the same time, in the boys' dormitory, Fatty darted out of the room like a rabbit. He happened to run into Shun Azure Bamboo, who had just returned. Shun Azure Bamboo looked astonished and said, "How are you awake?" Fatty explained his recent encounter with animated gestures. Then he took out his ring and said, "Luckily, my forbidden item is directly bound to my mental power, otherwise the outcome would have been hard to say." Shun Azure Bamboo quickly asked, "What about the others? How are they doing?" Fatty laughed and said, "It's fine. They're just trapped, I can save them." Hearing that Fatty could save them, Shun Azure Bamboo was naturally happy, but he was also puzzled about how to do it. Fatty took out a monocle, put it on and smiled slightly. "Would I ever say something that isn't true?" As Fatty adjusted his monocle, the corridor in his eyes was already filled with purple spider silk. Fatty took a deep breath, and the jade light in his chest emitted a golden glow. He stepped onto the flying sword and began to float. Shun Azure Bamboo saw this scene and couldn't help but sigh. Having money is really damn great. Fatty, ready to set off, let out a hearty laugh and soared into the air on his sword. He transformed into a streak of golden light, swiftly piercing through the long corridor, severing all the spider webs in his path. And those new recruits lying asleep in their beds also woke up in an instant. They came out into the hallway, asking each other about what had just happened. One of Shun Azure Bamboo's underlings ran over and said, "Brother Shun, what happened? I just had a nightmare. It felt like I was trapped in a giant spider's web and couldn't wake up no matter how hard I struggled." Fatty looked at him expectantly and said, "Do you remember how you managed to break free?" The little brother thought for a moment, trying hard to recall, and said, It seems like there was a glowing sow flying in the sky, and then somehow it just came back." Fatty shows his might to save everyone, breaks open the door at the female soldiers' dormitory. Spatial chaos makes it hard to tell apart. Everyone loses their composure for a moment. Biley Fatty exerted immense effort, relying on several forbidden items. Only then did he manage to awaken the slumbering new recruits. Yet in the blink of an eye, he was labeled as a flying sow. Furious, Fatty roared, "I, your young master, tread upon the jade light and wield the soul-cutting blade, saving you all from peril. So from your perspective it's like watching a sow fly up to the sky?" Shin Azure Bamboo's sidekick was so awkward. "Huh? That sow couldn't be." Before he could finish, Shun Azure Bamboo smacked him hard on the back of the head and scolded angrily, "You useless fool! Letting someone steal your soul like that. What kind of night watcher are you? You might as well go home and sell sweet potatoes. If it weren't for someone saving you, you'd still be fast asleep there." Fatty waved his hand dismissively. All right, swagger dude, don't bother scolding him anymore. I'm a man of great generosity and won't hold a grudge over such things." Suddenly Fatty's eyes widened sharply. "Detected." He quickly turned to Shin Azure Bamboo and said, "That big spider is hiding in the warehouse. Now that many new soldiers are awake, we have strength in numbers. We can overwhelm and kill that spider." Shin Azure Bamboo, however, looked serious and said, "It's not that simple. That spider truly has the ability to kill people." Fatty had a look of utter disbelief on his face. "Isn't this just a drill organized by the instructor?" Shun Azure Bamboo shook his head, "But we saw with our own eyes that someone sacrificed themselves, and the manner of death was extremely gruesome. Even if we have numbers, facing a powerful flowing stage mystic would inevitably result in casualties. We need to come up with a way to take down the spider while minimizing casualties." Fatty couldn't help but feel a bit surprised upon hearing this. In his impression, Shun Azure Bamboo was the type of reckless and hot-headed brute who acted without thinking. Unexpectedly, when faced with a real emergency, he turned out to be calmer than anyone else. At this moment, Fatty noticed something was off. He glanced around and asked doubtfully, "By the way, where is 7-Night?" Shun Azure Bamboo explained, "He took some people to the female soldiers' dormitory. There might be something mysterious in that building." Fatty nodded and muttered, "Something mysterious in the female soldiers' dormitory? Does that mean Molly is in danger?" With that thought, he immediately turned around and ran off, saying, "No, I have to go to the female soldiers' dormitory." Shin Azure Bamboo was stunned and exclaimed, "Wait, aren't you going to kill that spider anymore?" Without a second thought, Fatty directly threw the soul-cutting blade ring toward Shun Azure Bamboo. "With so many of you, dealing with one spider should be more than enough. This is the soul-cutting blade. It can sever the soul-weaving spider silk. I'll lend it to you for now. I'm off to play the hero and save the beauty." With that, Fatty hopped and skipped away, disappearing in a flash. Meanwhile, in front of the girls' dormitory, a deadlock had also arisen. The building was right there in plain sight, yet Lin Seven-Night's divine domain of the mortal world was completely unable to detect the presence of this building. It was as if it had been blocked by someone. This was the first time he had ever encountered such a situation. Chow Abyss was drenched in sweat from exhaustion at this moment and turned back to say, "No, this door still won't open." Suddenly, a new recruit named Li Xiaoguang behind Lin Seven-Night said, "The space here is blocked off. My Forbidden Ruins has a connection to space, so I can sense the situation in this building. Although it appears before our eyes from a spatial perspective, it is no longer here." Lin Seven-Night frowned and asked, "Then how do we get in?" Li Xiaoguang slowly drew the long blade from his back. "Let me give it a try." As his long blade was unsheathed, a peculiar spatial ripple spread out. Li Xiaoguang held the long blade and slowly swung it down toward the door of the female soldiers' dormitory. The blade swept past, leaving not a single mark on the dormitory door. Yet, a pitch-black slash was carved into the space before the door, immediately followed by the sound of shattering. It exploded with a deafening roar. Li Xiaoguang sheathed his knife and quickly said, "Come in quickly. I can only hold open a corner of this space for a moment. It will soon restore itself." With that, he led the group inside. After everyone had entered, the spatial gap slowly closed, leaving everyone in a vast empty space. The group headed toward the stairs, and Lin Seven-Night had just stepped onto them. Just heard a scream coming from upstairs. The few of them immediately dashed off, charging up the stairs. Just as they rushed upstairs, Lin Seven-Night froze in surprise. As soon as he went upstairs, he saw a bedroom. Chow Abyss couldn't help but feel surprised. Is this how the female soldiers' dormitory is designed? Going straight from the stairs to the bed? This design doesn't seem right, does it? Lin Seven-Night looked at the joint on the floor, shook his head, crouched down, gently rubbed it twice and said, "This joint is too smooth. Although the infrastructure maniacs in the training camp are incredibly skilled, they couldn't possibly achieve this level. It's as if someone cut two separate places and then spliced them together. There must be a mysterious entity in this building skilled in spatial transference." As he said this, Lin Seven-Night walked toward a door on one side. Then he pulled open the door, revealing the chaotic space inside. Lin Seven-Night nodded. Indeed, the layout inside this building is completely out of order, just like a scrambled Rubik's Cube. The other recruits, upon seeing the scene behind the door, couldn't help but feel their minds shaken. Is this the power of the mysterious? Truly is extraordinarily bizarre. Li Xiaoguang looked around, scratching his head and said, "There's a fork in the road ahead. Which way leads upstairs? Maybe we should split up and check both paths." Lin Seven-Night shook his head. There's something mysterious in this building. Splitting up right now is definitely not a wise choice. The left path leads to another dormitory. Behind that dormitory is a restroom, and further back is a half-flight of stairs going downward. The right path passes through two consecutive dormitories, then has a section of stairs leading upward. Li Xiaoguang was somewhat surprised. You can sense the paths. Lin Seven-Night nodded. Yes, but there's a range limit. I can't sense more than a few rooms. Chow Abyss pondered for a moment. In that case, we should take the path on the right. Lin Seven-Night, however, shook his head. No. We need to break through this wall. The new recruits were dumbfounded. Break the wall? Why do we need to break the wall? Lin Seven-Night explained. My psychic abilities cannot penetrate this building from the outside, but they work normally from the inside. This means that, from an internal perspective, each room here is merely misaligned and not spatially isolated. In other words, these walls inside the building can be broken through. Chow Abyss pondered briefly and understood, so that's how it is. Indeed, rather than following the opponent's design, it's better to break out of the framework and choose our own path. At that moment, a tall recruit from the team spoke up. Leave breaking the wall to me. Then he stepped forward, placed his hands on the wall, and a green light began to radiate from them. In just a few minutes, the entire wall had been melted into a huge hole. When everyone looked inside, it really is a staircase leading to the upper floor. Lin Seven-Night took the lead, with Chow Abyss and Li Xiaoguang following closely at the front. As soon as they stepped onto the stairs, the surrounding space began to shift rapidly, causing a wave of dizziness. When the changes stopped, the three found themselves in a completely unfamiliar scene. Chow Abyss frowned at the sight. We've been separated from the others. Lin Seven-Night also looked uneasy. Space has become distorted again. Is it because we damaged the wall? Or does it change periodically on its own? Turning to look at the two, he said, in any case, let's try to stick together from now on and not stray too far apart. If the mystery can only go this far, although it's a bit troublesome, it doesn't actually pose much of a threat. Chow Abyss nodded. That's right. As long as enough people enter the female soldiers' dormitory, breaking through here is just a matter of time. At that moment, Lin Seven-Night's gaze sharpened, and she frowned as she looked to one side. Then he turned and walked in that direction. Chow Abyss was taken aback and asked, What's wrong, Seven-Night? What did you sense? Lin Seven-Night remained silent and stopped in front of a dormitory door. He slowly raised his hand and pulled the door open. When the door was fully opened, Chow Abyss and Li Xiaoguang were stunned by the sight before them. In the dimly lit corridor, scattered bloodstains were everywhere. A woman's body, severed at the waist, lay quietly there, devoid of any signs of life, clearly having been dead for a long time. Headless Mystery dragging a blade appears. Xiaoguang is suddenly cut in half. Instructor flashes and swaps with a substitute, but Seven-Night sees through it at a glance. Looking at the body of the female recruit before them, Lin Seven-Night and the other two fell into a moment of silence. As they stepped forward, Li Xiaoguang froze. I know her. A comrade of mine once said he wanted to pursue her. I never thought it would end like this. Lin Seven-Night crouched down and examined the body carefully, frowning as he said, "There's only this one cut at the waist, and the wound is extremely smooth. It must have been severed by some kind of sharp weapon in a single strike. The upper limb muscles are stiff, indicating the atmosphere must have been very tense at the time. She was confronting something." Chao Abyss nodded and said, "The mysterious force she was confronting must have been far superior to her. That's why just one strike was enough to leave her with no ability to resist." Li Xiaoguang thought for a moment and asked, "Could it be that the mysterious force used a space-related forbidden ruin to directly sever her body?" Lin Seven-Night slowly stood up. "Impossible. Only a weapon could cause this kind of wound. Unless that mysterious force is also skilled in blade techniques. Or there is a second mysterious presence here." Suddenly Chao Abyss twitched his ears and said, "Wait, did you guys hear something? Like the sound of something heavy being dragged on the ground?" As he said this, all three of them heard the dragging noise. The sound grew closer and louder. Suddenly, it paused, then began moving toward the direction of Lin Seven-Night and the other two. Lin Seven-Night whispered softly, "He's coming. It's the mysterious being that killed this female soldier." Li Xiaoguang gritted his teeth and said, "What should we do? Fight or run?" Lin Seven-Night drew his twin blades. "Fight. At least we have to hold it back. If others were to encounter this mysterious flowing stage, there would be almost no chance of survival." Li Xiaoguang nodded upon hearing this and drew his large blade. "All right, I'll follow your lead." The sound was getting closer, like something sharp being dragged across the floor tiles. Before long, a blurry figure appeared at the end of the corridor in front of the three of them. That was a headless yet towering figure, standing over 2 meters tall, with a terrifying large mouth on its chest and abdomen. Even more terrifying was the long blade in its hand, which looked to be over 3 meters long at first glance. The sound was precisely that of this long blade being dragged along the ground. Li Xiaoguang couldn't help but mutter at the sight of this figure. "What the hell is that thing? It's moving way too slowly. At this pace we could totally..." Before he could finish his words, the headless mystery suddenly stomped its foot violently. Its entire figure shot towards Li Xiaoguang like a cannonball, unlike its previous sluggish movements. At this moment it arrived before Li Xiaoguang like a sudden clap of thunder, swinging its blade to strike him down. Li Xiaoguang had no time to react. He was directly cut in half at the waist, and his body flew out in 2 pieces. Chao Abyss was right beside Li Xiaoguang. Yet the mysterious figure seemed not to have noticed him at all. And upon seeing Li Xiaoguang's severed body, Chao Abyss gritted his teeth and reached for the long blade. Suddenly, Lin Seven-Night reached out and stopped Chao Abyss from drawing the blade, and made a gesture for him to be quiet. Immediately after, the surroundings around the two began to change rapidly. When they came to a stop, the two found themselves inside the restroom. Chao Abyss looked sorrowful and murmured, "Li Xiaoguang, he..." Little did they know, Lin Seven-Night patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, he's not dead. That was just a trick of the eye." At the very moment the blade was about to strike Li Xiaoguang, 2 figures suddenly appeared. In an instant they took Li Xiaoguang away and simultaneously created an extremely lifelike replica of a human body, which was sliced in 2 by the blade. "If I'm not mistaken, all of this is the instructor's doing." Chao Abyss suddenly realized, so the body we saw earlier in the cafeteria, and the female corpse in the hallway just now, were they all fake? Lin Seven-Night nodded. "Exactly. If it weren't for that momentary switch just now, I probably still wouldn't have realized it. Additionally, I think I figured out the weakness of that mysterious creature just now. It must be sound." Watching Chao Abyss with some confusion, Lin Seven-Night explained, "Its own speed isn't fast, but it can keenly detect nearby sound sources and then use its ability to move toward them at a nearly instantaneous speed." After a moment of thought, Chao Abyss understood. Indeed, thinking about it this way, the reason Li Xiaoguang was attacked back then was simply because he spoke in front of it. Lin Seven-Night agreed, saying, "And it's very likely that the louder the surrounding noise, the faster it moves. Without any sound, it can only move slowly." Chao Abyss nodded and said, "So that's the weakness you were talking about. Then, as long as we deliberately reduce the noise of our movements even at the pawn stage, we might be able to kill it." Suddenly, Chao Yuan frowned and asked, "Since you've already discovered it, why didn't we just kill it earlier?" Lin Seven-Night sighed and said, "Well, perhaps it's possible that I just figured out this weakness right now." On the other side, at the entrance of the female soldiers' dormitory, which had already returned to its original state, a chair was hurled directly at the door. It was Bailey Fatty, swinging the chair as he smashed it against the door. He was so exhausted he could barely stick out his tongue, complaining, "Damn it, what kind of material is this? It still won't break open." Finally, he simply threw the stool aside. "Such petty tricks can't stop me." With that, he reached out and pulled out a forbidden item from below that looked like a piece of chalk. Then he drew a circle on the dormitory door with it. The circle suddenly emitted a faint glow, and when the light faded away, a pitch-black opening was left behind. Without a second thought, Fatty stepped right into it. "Molly, don't be afraid. I'm here to save you." Little did he know, the moment both his feet stepped inside, the surrounding space shifted abruptly, making him dizzy and disoriented. Just as he was about to vomit, the space came to a halt, and he found himself in an office. He looked around. What the hell? Inception. Thinking this, he pushed open the door behind him and walked out. Outside, there was an empty corridor. He scratched his head. There was no other way, so he had to go on like this. So he simply walked outward. While walking, he shouted, "Molly! Seven-Night! Where are you all?" Suddenly, Fatty heard the sound of something heavy being dragged. Just as he was still wondering what the sound was, a figure appeared behind him. Immediately after, two hands clamped down and completely covered Fatty's mouth. Fatty turned around in terror and realized it was actually Molly. With one hand covering his mouth and the other making a shushing gesture, she whispered, "Don't speak. Come with me." Then a blue glowing door appeared behind Molly, and a woman's hand reached out from within it. The hand grabbed Molly's clothes firmly. It pulled Molly and the other person toward the light door. Finally, the two of them completely vanished into the light door. And the next second, the two of them landed in a room. There was also a blonde female soldier there, who let out a long sigh. "Safe now." Upon hearing this, Molly sprang up like a carp leaping out of water, grabbed Fatty by the collar and growled in a low voice, "You shouted so loudly just now. Do you have a death wish?" Fatty looked utterly bewildered. "Why can't I talk? And what on earth was that thing just now?" The blonde female soldier explained, "That was a mysterious flowing stage. We call it the Sound Hunter. Women are not inferior to men, always mindful of spatial changes. Extinguish the black flames burning on the body, revealing the mystery of space." Upon hearing the title Sound Hunter, Biley Fatty couldn't help but feel a bit puzzled. Molly explained, "That thing traces the source of sounds, and the louder the surrounding noise, the stronger it becomes. This intelligence was obtained at the cost of more than a dozen sisters' lives." As Molly spoke these words, the hatred and fury in her eyes seemed almost tangible. Fatty was even more astonished. "Are you saying more than a dozen new recruits actually died in battle? But wasn't this just a drill?" Molly gritted her teeth and said, "A drill? What kind of drill costs over a dozen lives? Anyway, I'm determined to kill that monster with my own hands." It was only then that Fatty noticed there were several new recruits in the room. They didn't speak, but their hands kept moving non-stop. Fatty was somewhat surprised. "What are they doing?" Molly walked over to a dark-haired female soldier, patted her shoulder and whispered, "Tiny, pull him into your psychic link too. This girl is precisely the Zhang Tiny that Lin Seven-Night and the others have been looking for." She simply extended her finger and drew a line in the air. An invisible thread of consciousness connected to Fatty's forehead. Instantly, Fatty's mind became a hive of activity as the female soldiers methodically analyzed the room's layout changes and their patterns. Molly said in her mind, "They are drawing a real-time spatial distribution map of the dormitory. The mysterious being controlling space has already joined forces with Sound Hunter. We have attempted to eliminate Sound Hunter several times before. But every time we were on the verge of success, the space would be directly disrupted." Fatty looked at the drawings in the female soldier's hands and exclaimed in surprise, "So you're trying to figure out the pattern behind each spatial anomaly? That's impressive. How did you come up with this idea?" Molly smiled proudly. "Everyone has their strengths. Among us female soldiers, there is also a strategist like Lin Seven-Night." As she spoke, she looked at a bespectacled girl with black hair. Thanks to Otzi always directing us, she was the first to discover the Sound Hunter's killing mechanism. She was also the one who proposed looking for patterns in spatial changes. At this moment, Otzi was immersed in thought, constantly trying to deduce patterns from the various drawings. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck her. She exclaimed, "I've got it. I finally figured it out." On the other side of the restroom, Chow Abyss looked at Lin Seven-Night in astonishment. "Seven-Night, what did you just say you figured out?" Lin Seven-Night calculated once more and nodded. "Indeed. I figured out the pattern of each spatial distortion. Seeing Chao Abyss looking utterly confused, Lin Seven-Night explained, spatial distortions may seem complex, but in reality, there are only two fundamental types of changes: cross-sectional rotation and vertical section rotation, and each rotation is by an integer multiple of a right angle. Just when you thought Chao Abyss had a slight grasp of it, guess what? He was completely lost again. Chao Abyss scratched his head. Seven-Night, just tell me straight. Can you now predict the patterns of spatial changes? Lin Seven-Night shook her head. No, the information I have is still too fragmented, and I haven't observed it enough times. But this pattern of change, I always feel a sense of familiarity with it. Chao Abyss was taken aback. Familiar? Have you encountered it before? Suddenly, a sharp dragging sound rang out. Lin Seven-Night and Chao Abyss were startled. The sound hunter had arrived. The two quickly stood up, grabbed their weapons and prepared for battle. Chao Abyss looked at Lin Seven-Night, made a few hand gestures, and Lin Seven-Night nodded in understanding before heading toward the door. Upon reaching the door, Lin Seven-Night gently pushed it open. Little did he know, the hinges were faulty, producing a loud creaking sound. The moment the sound echoed, both Lin Seven-Night and Chao Abyss's faces darkened. They had planned for everything, but never expected to be betrayed by a door. Sure enough, the next second, a massive attack came crashing over, and the entire door exploded with a deafening blast. Lin Seven-Night and the other were both sent flying backward by the shockwave. The two rose to their feet once more as the smoke began to clear. And Sound Hunter stood at the doorway, facing the two from a distance. Lin Seven-Night pointed at Sound Hunter. Chao Abyss nodded. The two tried to tread as lightly as possible as they charged toward Sound Hunter. As they approached, Chao Abyss suddenly leaped up, swinging his scabbard toward Sound Hunter. Sound Hunter twisted his body and swung his blade, sending Chao Abyss flying through the air. This time Chao Abyss shot out like a cannonball and crashed directly into a pile of debris. Lin Seven-Night seized the opening and thrust both blades straight into Sound Hunter's chest. But the blades barely penetrated 5 centimeters before getting stuck firmly. His body had suddenly hardened. Lin Seven-Night thought to himself, this is bad. It seems the sound not only increased its speed, but also enhanced all its attributes. And this guy's intelligence is probably not low. It knows to create noise at critical moments to boost itself. At that moment, Sound Hunter's massive hand suddenly lifted. It reached straight for Lin Seven-Night's head. Lin Seven-Night quickly leaped aside. He jumped down from Sound Hunter's back. The moment he landed, Lin Seven-Night immediately unfolded the abyssal deity ruins. The two long blades embedded in Sound Hunter's body vibrated and flew out, and fell back into Lin Seven-Night's hands. Just as Lin Seven-Night and Sound Hunter were in a standoff, a strange eerie laughter suddenly echoed. Lin Seven-Night's heart sank as he realized something was wrong. From the smoke behind him, a figure rose with twisted movements. Standing there was Chao Abyss, gripping a long blade, his body shrouded in an ominous aura intertwined with black flames. He had already entered the form of the Black King's annihilation. Then Chao Abyss let out a fierce roar. He charged toward Sound Hunter with a sinister grin. Watching Chao Abyss and Sound Hunter locked in combat, Lin Seven-Night was momentarily speechless. If only Chao Abyss had some sense of awareness right now, if he weren't constantly grinning foolishly and could just lighten his movements a bit, he would have taken down this mystery long ago. Watching the two figures grow increasingly fierce in battle, Lin Seven-Night couldn't help but let out a long sigh. I should never have let Chao Abyss attack back then. Suddenly, Lin Seven-Night felt the surroundings sway and frowned, saying, "Here we go again." Sure enough, the scene around him rapidly transformed. When it stopped again, he was already standing in front of a staircase. Lin Seven-Night thought to himself, it seems the second mysterious being in this building doesn't want me to interfere in their battle. Probably has quite a high intelligence too. However, Lin Seven-Night didn't care at all. He swung his twin blades and struck, shattering a nearby wall into pieces. The entity controlling the space clearly hadn't anticipated that, since the headless man was being restrained by Chao Abyss. In that case, there's no need for me to hold back anymore. Thus, Lin Seven-Night transformed into a human bulldozer, taking an unconventional path. He crashed through walls in a straight line, sprinting forward relentlessly. While sprinting, he used forbidden ruins to sense his surroundings, and suddenly, a silvery white cube appeared within his perception. Lin Seven-Night paused. So this must be the second anomaly. But so far, all the anomalies he had encountered were living creatures. He had never seen one with such a regular shape. It looked just like a Rubik's Cube. Wait a minute, a Rubik's Cube. Lin Seven-Night suddenly thought of something, a smile appearing on her face as she murmured to herself, "So that's it." Just as Lin Seven-Night saw the mysterious Rubik's Cube and had a sudden realization, the female soldiers on the other side also made progress. Billy Fatty scratched his head in confusion and repeated Otzi's words. "What Rubik's Cube?" Otzi explained with a smile. "If you think of each room as a small block on a Rubik's Cube, then the entire 3 buildings actually form an irregularly shaped n-order Rubik's Cube. Every spatial disruption can actually be seen as this cube being rapidly scrambled, with the positions of the small blocks changing at high speed, creating the illusion of being untraceable. But in reality, as long as you grasp the direction and angle of each rotation of the cube, you can predict its movements. By summarizing and analyzing the first 32 disordered patterns, I have deduced the changing patterns of this cube. That is to say, from the next step onward, I will be able to predict the trajectory of its changes." Hearing this, the female soldiers were naturally delighted. Fatty in particular was utterly amazed. "That's not all," Otzi continued. "What's more, I already know the hiding place of this mysterious creature. So we need to make a quick decision now. Should we first go to kill the mysterious being in the chaotic space, or go to kill Sound Hunter?" Molly said loudly. "Of course, kill Sound Hunter first." The other female soldiers also chimed in. "Kill Sound Hunter first. It has killed so many of our sisters, it must die." Otzi nodded upon hearing this. "Good. Then let's proceed with the upcoming chaos simulation in advance. The start of the next chaos will be our chance to kill Sound Hunter." Back to Lin Seven-Night, he was sitting on the ground, continuously tracing imaginary lines with his fingers, calculating something. At this moment, he had also realized that the disarray of the room was following the pattern of a Rubik's Cube. He was now separated from the mystery of the Rubik's Cube by a full 4 walls. Although breaking through the walls wasn't difficult, while he was doing so, the mystic cube would definitely sense his intentions. Once it disrupts the space again, finding it would become much more difficult. At this thought, Lin Seven-Night stood up. He slowly drew his long blade. At this point, there's no choice but to take a gamble. Lin Seven-Night, holding dual blades, assumes a charging stance toward a wall. Immediately after, Lin Seven-Night stomps both feet forcefully. The whole person shot forward like an arrow released from its bow. In an instant, the wall in front shattered with a thunderous crash, and Lin Seven-Night charged straight through. In less than 2 seconds, Lin Seven-Night had already broken through 2 walls, with only one barrier left between him and the mysterious Rubik's Cube. The mysterious Rubik's Cube seemed to sense something, and its form began to spin rapidly. Lin Seven-Night instinctively felt a blur before his eyes as the surrounding space rapidly transformed. Yet, upon seeing this scene, Lin Seven-Night laughed out loud. This mysterious cube had still fallen for it in the end. Immediately after, he kicked off the wall with his foot. He suddenly charged toward the ceiling above. By the time Magic Fong realized what was happening, it was already too late. Lin Seven-Night had already appeared before it. Lin Seven-Night looked at the mysterious Rubik's Cube right before her eyes, a happy smile spreading across her face. "As expected, I won the bet after all. You see me charging recklessly and assume I haven't deciphered the pattern of changes, so you simply flip the space you're in right above me. The current situation between us in terms of chess. Then, checkmate." With that, Lin Seven-Night swung his twin blades in a wide arc, slashing directly at the mysterious cube. On the other side, Fatty followed the female soldiers as they headed upstairs. He looked at the half number of troops with confusion and asked, "Why are we splitting up? We don't have many people to begin with. Isn't it a bad idea to divide our forces now?" Molly sighed and said, "Although we've grasped the pattern of spatial distortions now, the exact location of Sound Hunter is still unclear. By splitting into multiple routes, as long as one group detects Sound Hunter's position, the others can immediately close in and surround it." After saying that, she didn't forget to mock Fatty a few times. "Can't even figure out such a simple concept. What on earth do you rich kids have in your heads?" Fatty immediately put on a deeply affectionate expression. "Of course, it's all you." His greasy remarks made Molly punch him directly. Otzi, who was walking at the front, signaled for everyone to stop and whispered, "Did you hear something? Sounds like the noise of a battle?" Molly was taken aback. "That's strange. None of the other groups encountered Sound Hunters. How could there be a battle?" The next second, a loud sound erupted. A figure crashed through the ceiling and fell down. It was precisely the Black King's slashing annihilation form, Chow Abyss. Before the female soldiers could react, The Sound Hunter leaped down from the upper floor and charged at Chow Abyss, raising its blade to strike. Chow Abyss raised his long blade, blocking the strike. But the ground beneath him could no longer bear the weight. The ground collapsed once again, and both figures plummeted downward. Fatty was dumbfounded. Holy shit, this is the Abyss. Molly also looked astonished. He actually managed to solo the Sound Hunter in such a huge commotion without getting cut in half? That's way too badass. After saying that, he looked at Otzi. What do we do now? Otzi waved his hand. Chase after them. Notify the other teams to gather here. Having someone who can confront Sound Hunter head-on gives us a huge advantage. At the command, all the female soldiers sprang into action, but Fatty remained in place with a puzzled look. Chow Abyss is here, so where did Seven-Night go? On the other side, Chow Abyss had been slashed all the way down to the basement by Sound Hunter with sparks and lightning. Before Chow Abyss could even catch his breath, Sound Hunter was already approaching again. But then, Sound Hunter suddenly felt a lightness in his hand as the entire broadsword unexpectedly floated up. Seeing this, Otzi shouted through the mental link. Now's the time, take action. The female soldiers immediately launched a full-scale assault, charging straight toward Sound Hunter. The reason they restrained that massive blade was to prevent Sound Hunter from using it to create sounds and amplify his power. As long as the massive blade is lifted off the ground, keeping the sound below a certain decibel level, killing Sound Hunter would be as easy as turning over a hand. But just at that moment, the surrounding space suddenly began to shift. Otzi was shocked. No, this pattern of change is not right. But the next second, the scene where several people appeared. Yet it felt unnervingly normal. Otzi quickly scanned with his eyes. This isn't spatial chaos. It's been restored to normal. The dormitory is back to normal. Molly was utterly shocked. Could it be that the other mysterious entity causing spatial chaos has been eliminated? Molly wasn't wrong. At this moment, Lin Seven-Night gazed at the silver fragments not far from him and sighed. Killing a mysterious flowing stage creature is truly not easy. Even though it doesn't possess any offensive capabilities,